Hello dear friends, hi, how are you all doing? My name is August, this is Cozy Rosy Reads, and today is a continuation of my zodiac book recommendations. So we are currently in Leo season. Look at me, actually doing a book recommendation in the zodiac season we're in. It is Leo season. I wonder how you all are feeling, because I'm definitely feeling like I want to get my shit together. I want to get my life together. I want to be on top of things. I want to be feeling and looking cute. It's been very hectic and busy, like just getting life together. First off, in this video, I do want to share, of course, some famous Leo authors. And if you're curious and want to backtrack to when we started this in Aries season, I will link that whole channel down below for you all if you want to get some tailored book recommendations. But to start, we're going to do some famous Leo authors. The first one I'm going to share is James Baldwin. James Baldwin was a Leo. Oh my gosh, never knew that. That is so cool. So of course he is first on this list. I read Giovanni's Room earlier this year, freaking loved it. Cannot wait to read more by him. So if none of these book recommendations vibe with you, go check out maybe some Leo authors and get into the mind of a Leo. Next we have Ray Bradbury. I love Ray Bradbury. Okay, I think his writing style is so good. I remember the first Ray Bradbury book I ever read was Dandelion Wine, which is such a perfect summer read. If you take anything away from this video, please just read Dandelion Wine. They're like short little vignettes about reminiscing on childhood summers, and it is impeccable. The writing is so lyrical and whimsical, and definitely it guided me towards the literature I like to read now. I read that when I was in like 6th grade, required reading. Freaking loved it. And then we have Emily Bronte. Oh my gosh, like so many classic works of literature, so famous, world-renowned Emily Bronte. Then lastly, we have Isabel Allende, who is much more of like a modern kind of contemporary author, but just such beautiful writing yet again. A very talented author, has so many works. I swear every time I go to a used bookstore or Goodwill or something, there's always an Isabel Allende book there, and I'm like, I've never even heard of this book. How many books do you have now? Now, what would one of my zodiac book recommendations be without consulting with cosmopolitan.com for the most intense, rude, truthful descriptions of zodiac signs with their positive traits, but then also what it can read as, kind of that shadow side of each personality trait. So here are the traits of a Leo. Leos are vivacious, which can also just be read as attention seeking. Leos like to live the good life, which can be read as spoilt. They are also natural leaders, which can be read as egomaniac. They are also popular, which can be read as approval obsessed. And lastly, they are protective, which can be read as possessive. So given those traits, it was very hard for me to pick books, friends. This was not an easy zodiac month for me. This was really, really difficult, and I don't know if I did a good job, but I tried. I tried so hard to remember characters in books and how they acted and how they interacted with other characters. And I think that's a really big emphasis on what Leos are and what Leos come across as, is very character, individualistic, motivating. They don't necessarily talk, especially in these traits, about kind of like reacting to external factors or forces, how they interact with the world around them. It is very individualistic. It's very catered to their needs and their wants and how they perceive reality. So this was very difficult because I had to remember specific characters and how they acted and how, yeah, it was just very, very difficult for me in comparison to like Taurus season, for example, where it was just very grounding, nature focused. So I could recommend more books about beautiful writing styles, very languid writing styles, books set in nature. It was a little bit easier to handpick books that had maybe a little bit wider variety. This one just felt so character driven, so I picked some character driven books, and I hope it works well for you. I don't know. Definitely let me know if these worked for you, if they tickled your fancy. I don't freaking know what I'm doing. So yet again, I have categorized each little kind of superlative, little genres for each category. So we have a contemporary book, a memoir slash nonfiction book, then we have a thriller, and then we have a classic book. So those are the 4 books that you can look for in today's video. And let's just go ahead and get started, shall we? So the first book is going to be our contemporary pick. And for that, after much deliberation, I chose to go with Elsewhere by Gabrielle Zevin. This is a book that I read probably when I was like 13 or 14, and I freaking fell in love with it. It is one of my favorite kind of preteen, early adolescent books that I've ever read. This book follows a 15-year-old girl named Liz, and the book opens up with her, I believe, waking up on a cruise ship. And when she wakes up, she's completely discombobulated. She doesn't know where the heck she is. She does not know what's going on. And later she finds out that she is actually in the afterlife. And it's this place kind of in between called Elsewhere. So she has passed away. She's very upset that she's passed away because she has so much life left to live. Like, she was so looking forward to going to prom. She was looking forward to her friendships, potential romances, and having boyfriends, and just living a teenage life, like being able to drive. There was so much of her life that was left. So she is entering this space and entering this world with a lot of anger and frustration and sadness, and wishing that she had control over the situation. What I absolutely loved about this book, though, is how funny it is. It's funny, but it hits you in this way that it is just so filled with grief and loss. Because once Liz arrives at this place called Elsewhere, she meets her grandmother for the first time, and her grandmother has passed on, but her grandmother is now in her like 30s, because in this place in Elsewhere, people age backwards. So it's set up like this huge kind of utopian society where everybody who enters starts to age backwards until they are babies, and when they're babies, they're sent into a river to be born back on Earth. So that is kind of the philosophy behind this book, but what makes it really interesting is that there are these kind of like almost telescopes that people can go and look into them down on Earth and see what their loved ones are doing at that time. So Liz is really struggling with this. She does not know her grandmother. Her grandmother takes her in. She doesn't know Elsewhere at all. She doesn't know anyone else there. Of course, there are some famous celebrity cameos, and she gets to watch as her like best friend goes to prom. Like, she can watch her friends moving on with life and her family moving on with life, and she feels this separateness. She feels this jealousy, this longing, and how much she just genuinely wants to take control of her life again. She does not want to be sent back on Earth. She just wants to go back to Earth now. So it is comical, it is sad, it is eye-opening, it's very thought-provoking. This is just such a well-rounded piece of YA literature. Like, oh my god. I think anyone can read this at any age. It just brings up so many questions about mortality and adolescence. So the reason I picked this is because it is written and told from a 15-year-old girl's perspective, which I feel like naturally, no matter like who you were at that age, there is this sense of kind of like Leo-ness to it. You kind of still believe at that time that the world revolves around you, that you are in control of your life despite all of these external forces like parents and school and work. You're starting to develop who you are as a person, and you're wanting to take natural leadership and control of your life. And at the same time, this also has some Leo senses of possessiveness and protectiveness. She does not like seeing that her family and her loved ones have moved on without her and are creating memories without her. So she feels this, again, that jealousy, that greed, that possessiveness of like, those are my friends. What are they doing hanging out with new people? Which again is a very like teenage feeling, but it also encapsulates kind of that Leo perspective of wanting people to love you. But how do they love you if you are no longer there? They're holding on to memories of you or the idea of you rather than you yourself. So she can watch and look at her own funeral. She can look at all of these things happening around the world and to gain a bigger perspective of how she fits into all of this while she's no longer physically present. And you know, because also she is a 15-year-old girl, like I will continue to reiterate, she is a teenager, and there is this sense of kind of being spoiled a little bit. She wants things to go in her own way, and she cannot understand why it won't be her way. So she, even in Elsewhere, is actively fighting to change the rules just for her. She thinks that the rules should be changed because she passed away without her wanting it, passed away too early. So she, even in her own little community, is being this like rallying leader of like, I don't want to be a part of this. How can I stop this? How can I fix it? So overall, I just think this is such a fun, funny, difficult, grieving, loss, sad book. Perfect. I love this book just in general. So I hope this fits for you, Leos. I hope it's a book that interests you. It is such a fun read, easy to read, but yeah, very thought-provoking and just so well done. I really want to reread this now. I just like sold it to myself. I want to reread it. So that is the contemporary pick. Elsewhere. Okay, friends, next we have our memoir pick. And for this, I'm gonna throw something at you that I think most people would not really assume I would, one, recommend, but two, that I would have read already. And I did read this a few years ago, and that is, I need to read it out loud because it is a long title, so please. Down the Rabbit Hole, Curious Adventures and Cautionary Tales of a Former Playboy Bunny by Holly Madison. Okay, do not judge. If you're judging right now, take it out, take it out, take it out. You are judging, it's okay. It's okay to judge. I judged. But let's go ahead and like reframe our brains here. Why do we feel judgment towards this book? Because I definitely did. I felt judgment. I felt like I would go into it and just get a lot of like scathing expose of what it's like to be a Playboy bunny, how manipulative it was, and like all this stuff. And while we do get that, we get a really tender, heartfelt, difficult story of Holly's life. I originally did have a physical copy of this book, but in one of my, book kind of purging situation where I was just getting rid of a bunch of books, I did donate it, but I read this book physically and I include some photographs, and it was such an enthralling read. This is an incredible memoir. So in this book, we are following Holly's early kind of teenage obsession with the Playboy Mansion, Hugh Hefner, the Playboy magazine, everything. She wanted to be a Playboy bunny so bad. And this book really is about be careful what you wish for, because once she enters that world, she is hit head on with being physically and emotionally manipulated, being used for her body, not being listened to, losing this sense of control again that I think kind of ties with that Leo-ness of being a natural leader, being a really big, bubbly, effervescent, popular personality, but being diminished to this little role that you thought you wanted in your life, but it not being that at all. So what I really liked about this book too is that throughout it, Holly makes a lot of references to her falling down the rabbit hole and makes a lot of correlation between her versus Alice in Wonderland, Through the Looking Glass, like all of those stories by Lewis Carroll. So there is this like really profound, pretty good writing style, but it is so digestible. You feel like you're in a room talking to Holly personally. And by the end of the book, you feel really, really connected to her. You are genuinely rooting for her to get out of this situation. You are really angry that society has let somebody like Hugh Hefner into so much power. It is disgusting, a lot of content warnings specifically for sexual coercion, manipulation, emotional abuse, just the whole wide gamut. So please be cautious going into this book. But it is so incredibly profound. I learned so much. And I also learned so much about myself as like being a judgmental reader and judging women, which is so misogynistic, but like judging women for getting into these situations and for wanting this in the first place. Like I just thought it was immediately just so demeaning. Why would a woman want this? My perspective completely flipped after this book. And I think if you are a inclusive feminist, I think you definitely should read more books like this. It was so incredibly eye-opening. It really put me in my place. But to take it back to why I chose this for Leos, Holly herself is, like I said, so effervescent and bubbly. She gets along with a lot of the girls in the house. She is really popular. She is loved by so many people. She really makes a really positive impact on the Playboy kind of world and bubble that she was living in. And I do believe she was there from like the 1990s to maybe early 2000s. She is also such a natural leader, and I did not know this, but she actually ended up taking on so many external roles for the Playboy magazine. Not only was she modeling in it, she was also designing the pieces and the spreads. She was taking a lot on for herself to not only be a part of, if they were on MTV, she would be with Hugh Hefner giving the tours. Like, she just took so much initiative to be a positive, creator in the Playboy world. But she also truly stuck to her guns. She made it so apparent that she was not comfortable with doing nude spreads. She was not comfortable with doing all of these things. She set her boundaries. She was just this natural leader and this rallier for these women to speak up about their boundaries and to say when they were uncomfortable. But at the same time, she was put in really difficult situations and predicaments where she was not allowed a voice. And it is truly heartbreaking to see somebody who is a natural born leader, somebody who wants something for the better and wants to improve a situation or a physical space, and to be denied so many times because she is not allowed to have a voice. She is there to be a beautiful body. So overall, this book was just incredibly insightful. I think that it just brought so many different elements up to the surface. And once I finished this book, I went on a serious deep dive into her life and to all of her interviews that she's done in the past, all of the MTV cribs that she was featured on with Hef in the Playboy Mansion. I just learned as much as I possibly could to shape my own brain and reconfigure all of the judgmental, misogynistic things that my brain was telling me. And I learned so much. I gained a whole new respect and appreciation and just genuine care and protective feeling over the Playboy bunnies, for sure. So I learned a lot. I really do recommend this book if you are interested in this, if you are okay with some of the content warnings. Overall, I learned so much. I think Holly herself has a lot of really, really strong characteristics that would encapsulate really well with the Leo attitude and mood, but still remaining that grounding sense of human emotion. Sometimes we forget that these women who are sex workers or nude models or Playboy bunnies, we forget that they have a spectrum of emotions. We are still kind of playing into this misogynistic, judgmental mindset that they are just a bunch of blonde bimbos with fake boobs. I feel like I am not alone in that. I feel like we are still unlearning so much, especially if you're a child of the 1990s to early 2000s. That's what you saw, that's what you were told through social media and pop culture. So I am unlearning that. I unlearned so much from this book, and the amount of sadness and also, trigger warning too, that Holly does consider ending her life in this book as well. She does talk about some very suicidal thoughts. So definitely, again, be cautious going into it. But yeah, it just talks about her deep dive into depression, feeling like there's something wrong with her body as well in comparison to all the Playboy bunnies, how plastic surgery was so heavily recommended and almost required to be a Playboy bunny, how it really messed with her self-esteem. So yeah, definitely be cautious going into that. So that is my pick for memoir. I would absolutely love to hear your thoughts on that one, especially if you do pick it up and read it. Yeah, just let me know for sure. Next we have our thriller pick, and again, much deliberation went into this, but I decided to finally land on Rosemary's Baby by Ira Levin. I love that I'm showing this to you. There's no dust jacket. There it is. Rosemary's Baby. This is kind of a classic thriller horror. You know what I'm saying? A lot of people know about this book. I love my copy. There are some beautiful deckled edges. It's very old and it has green sprayed edges on the top. I don't know why. It's great. Yes, let's talk about Rosemary's Baby, okay? So this book follows a young woman named Rosemary, and she is recently married. Her and her husband are apartment hunting. That's kind of how we start the beginning of this book. They find the apartment of their dreams, and it just fancifully, delightfully, deliciously talks about how they are making this apartment their home. Rosemary becomes pregnant. They're very excited. She's nesting in the apartment. She's getting it all ready for the baby. They start meeting their new neighbors who are incredibly nosy and are always intruding on Rosemary's business and inviting themselves over unannounced. And Rosemary's like, I don't know what to do with you. This is very strange. So this was published in the 1960s. And if you've seen the movie is spot on with the book. I will not lie to you. So if you've already seen the movie, I do recommend reading the book because you will be amazed at how the dialogue is exactly the same. The setup is exactly the same. Like, they just did a fantastic job. So what makes this book a thriller, though, is definitely that Rosemary starts to fall seriously, like chronically ill while she's pregnant. And she starts to do this deep dive and research into like witchcraft and potions. And she is convinced that her neighbors are poisoning her, that she was sexually assaulted, not by her husband, but like some other kind of entity impregnated her. So there are definitely some content warnings for almost kind of like this drugged sexual assault kind of situation. It is very creepy to read about because she is kind of conscious that it's happening to her. So please be cautious going into that for sure. But she is convinced that her neighbors are involved in this somehow, that they are being too nosy, too creepy, too attached to her. She falls chronically, horribly ill. She loses a lot of weight. Her hair is falling out. She does not feel well. And when she tries to express her concerns that she's being poisoned, that she is being introduced or inducted into this cult that she believes is happening in her new apartment complex, she is met with so much dismay. Because again, this was in the 1960s. She is being told that she is hysterical, that she needs to be locked up. Nobody believes her. As you are reading this book, you're like, somebody please just believe her. Oh my God. And there's just a lot of chaotic things happening in this apartment building that is setting Rosemary on edge. Like, she is just not comfortable in this apartment. She wants to leave. She's starting to not trust her husband. She's feeling like really isolated, completely isolated during this pregnancy, and feeling like she's not being told the truth. And then things unravel. At the very, very end, things unravel. So the reason I chose this book is because Rosemary herself is she's a little spoiled. Just a little bit, not a whole lot. She, like, throughout the book, she is not listened to, but she is used to getting her way. She is a housewife in the 1960s. She goes shopping a lot. She just kind of enjoys the luxuries of life without really having to work for them, without really having to earn them. She just spends time at home and cooks for her husband, and then all of these atrocious things happen to her. But the way that she interacts with other people, she is very accommodating. She's very kind of people-pleasing. She wants people to like her, and she doesn't want to come across as rude by kicking her nosy neighbors out. She spends a lot of time with them. She just really wants to spend time alone, though, but she keeps accommodating them. And she is incredibly protective of her baby, even when she's going through this like horrible self-realization or exploration into cults and rituals and Satanism kind of. She's still very protective of her baby and just wants the absolute best for it. And she wants the best for herself and her life. And it's just so psychologically intense, but through this like 1960s housewife kind of vision. So it feels very like light and airy and dreamy. And then there's like this just kind of psychological breakdown that's happening, and people are questioning her reality. She's questioning her reality. It's just so good. It's such a page turner. It's really, really easy to read. I flew through this when I read it like 2 falls ago. Definitely a very good autumn book. I am recommending this in August, but we're creeping closer to spooky season. I flew through it. I loved it. I just wanted to eat this book up. I thought it was so well done. And I think Rosemary as a character is so complex and dynamic, and it just really does a deep dive into her sanity, because majority of this book does take place in her apartment. Like, that's kind of the only place she really goes. So I thought it was just a really good psychological kind of study of one character. So I'm gonna be recommending Rosemary's Baby by Levin. And here we go, friends. This is the last book that I'll be recommending for this video, and the classic genre, and that is Orlando by Virginia Woolfe. I personally had such an interesting reading experience with this because I wanted to read it so bad. I was gifted it for my birthday by my partner. I read it, and it wasn't until I got halfway through this book that I realized, oh, this is supposed to be funny. I was taking it so literally. I was taking it so seriously, which is something that I feel like I'm not alone in, taking classics really incredibly seriously and forgetting that people in the past while writing, they had a sense of humor. It's just different than ours now. So yeah, this is not a serious book. It is very satirical. It is very funny, which is a really good reason why I'm recommending it, because I feel like Leos do have a really good sense of humor. So this book begins with Orlando, who is a very like romantic, passionate young guy. He's a nobleman and he writes poetry, and he is just a little self-absorbed and self-obsessed and thinks he's gonna be the next like poet laureate kind of. But then one day he wakes up and he is completely transformed into a woman. There's no explanation. If you're looking for an explanation, you will not find it in this book. He just wakes up as a woman and completely takes on that identity. There is no questioning. He's just like, yep, I've always just been a woman. So Orlando is now a woman. Everyone around him does not question his sexuality either. There is no like confusing elements. Like, it's just like, yeah, I'm a woman. That's just how it is. And another thing is that Orlando lives like forever. This takes place over like 3 different centuries. So it talks about kind of the growth of women's place and women's movements through those centuries, as Orlando gets to explore and see what she is allowed to do through each kind of time period. As she's this aristocrat, this like bourgeoisie noble person, she still always is kind of like weighted on hand and foot. She's still part of this like noble aristocracy. She is spoiled. She's a spoiled character and just longs to be this like romantic poet. It is a bizarre book. It is very unique. It's very bizarre. Don't go into it as I did, thinking it's very, very serious. It is funny. It is strange and satirical and bizarre and whimsical. Like I said, the reasons I chose it for Leo is because of her kind of like self-obsession, her egotistical kind of nature of like, she's a nobleman, she has all this power, especially when she is a man earlier on in the book, but is just so obsessed with becoming a poet, and the poems are really not that great. And it's like he had so much power to like kind of do good, but instead just really wanted to take on this like authorship and wanted to be a writer. Orlando is also consistently surrounded by really popular, influential, authoritative figures of power. So just surrounded by really powerful people, powerful positions, has a lot of influence over others, lives this aristocratic kind of lifestyle where it's just like way above everybody else, doesn't really have to think about what normal people or the plebeians, so to say, would be doing down below. So it's just always this kind of like air of superiority, despite changing sexes like halfway through the book, and nobody bats an eye though. So there is this lens of inclusion and this lens of acceptance that I thought was just so brilliantly well done. I think it's just such an interesting book, super weird. I really liked it. And then if you read this book, highly, highly, highly recommend the movie with Tilda Swinton. Oh my God, Tilda Swinton. Ooh, amazing. She plays Orlando as the male and the female. It is very artsy. It's very, very quiet. So stunning though, so beautiful. So definitely recommend reading this and then go watch the movie. But yeah, so that is my pick for classic literature for Leos, is Orlando. So there we have it, dear friends. Those are the 4 books that I'm recommending to you all for Leo season, or if you are a Leo yourself, I would absolutely love to hear your thoughts. If these books sound interesting, if they sound good to you, if you feel like they fit the Leo season that we're currently in, if you're a Leo and they sound interesting, if you've read any of them, like just give me all the deets. Just give me all the deets down below. I so greatly appreciate you all being here. Thank you so much for watching. I wish you all the best remainder of your Leo season. I hope it's going really well. I hope you're all doing well, and I'll see you all very soon for my next video. Stay cozy, my friends. Bye!